Folks, every once in a while, in the quest for content, you'll find someone on Facebook who's posting some really cool design idea. And one of those folks is Phillip Schwarzmann with us today. He posted something, Design Diary number 4, related to the base running for a very cool looking card driven action baseball game. Now, he's out on the West Coast there. You might be able to tell by the hat or by our background from his San Francisco board game design group that he runs, a group that kind of tests one another's prototypes. And since he is an actual social media guru, we came up with a nice list of 10 topics we can discuss around the idea of something that folks probably have heard me harp on, trying to connect the old big board, big chart sports games community to the community of people who are now playing, card driven games with, whether it's the Leader series out of Dan Verson or, a little Kickstarter release, one of millions called Bounty Hunter, nice action card, Wingspan with all the great little codes on there. It's a real paradigm shift. It's been going on since the Eurogame trend of, I don't know, 10, 15 years probably, or more. But Phillip, you can fill us in all on that. Thank you, sir, for your time.
Yeah, great to be here. Thanks for having me on. So I'm Phil Schwarzmann. I'm co-founder of the San Francisco Board Game Designers. We're a group of designers that go from the well-published to those just starting off and everybody in between that's here in the Bay Area. Bay Area has a great design community all over in Oakland, down in the South Bay in San Jose as well, and up here in San Francisco. So and I got into I was a Strat and Statis guy back in the day as a kid, and then I moved to Finland. I got a job at Nokia working in Helsinki, and didn't have any friends. This was 2002 or so, and Euro board games were a hot thing over there, way before it came to the States. The States was at the time was still doing a lot of war games, a lot of luck-based games. And over in Germany, we used to call them German games before they got the Euro gamer tag. They were a popular item. We meet up with friends and couples would get together to play games. In the States, if you did that now it's different nowadays. But if you said, "Hey, let's come on over, let's play a game together," people will look at you look funny and be like, "Hey, want to get together and play Candyland with my wife? That's a little creepy." So I really moved to Finland, got a lot of friends from German games meetups, and would actually go to Essen to go to the big Essen Spiel every year. And then sometime in the 2000s, I saw that the game started to creep over to the United States, which was great, and that Euro gamer tag became a popular thing over here. And then I moved back here about 10 years ago. And of course, it's just blown up. But what I've been, and a few years ago, I dusted off the old copies of Strat and Statis and a bunch of others, and just had a great time playing with them. And I kept thinking about how there's so much that the sports sim world could learn from modern Euro game mechanics, and vice versa as well. And that's another thing. It's not just a one-way thing. I don't want to. There's a lot of great games, and they're still great. So I kind of wanted to discuss. I had a list of 10 things that I thought the new school and the old school could learn from each other.
That's brilliant, and it's all the lists that, I mean, it's the real pain points, perhaps, if you will, if you want to call them such, but the opportunities we had. Now, obviously, since we're doing the social thing, just a real quick note for the APBA folks. I became aware of the Euro game trend when Bob Tassinari, he bought the APBA Journal, the rights to it all, about 12 years ago, and he happened to live near me, so he came down, played a little APBA football, and he also introduced my wife and I to Ticket to Ride, which is like one of the kings of the game. How do you define a Euro game?
That is a really good question. I think, if you compare it to what the difference is, I think they're a little bit maybe shorter in length. I think that we're the typical a good Euro game might be anywhere between 45 minutes, maybe an hour and 90 minutes. So traditional old Avalon Hill games would, you do a whole afternoon. I think they're a little simpler too. I think they target that family, they call it the family weight, family audience. There's that big award that's been around, I think, believe since the late 70s, the German Spiel des Jahres. I don't know German, even though my last name is very German. The German game of the year. In fact, they just a few days ago they announced the winner of the 2022 game of the year, and they really, and I've heard that because the Germans had we'll use the word interesting history, especially when it comes to war and violence. They kind of, after World War II, they took an opposite approach to gaming, where they didn't want any sort of conflict or war or violence, and so they created games that focused on civilization and history and farming and just cooperative thing, working together, and flowers and happy things. And while the Americans were still with the World War II bombers and things, and so it was when it comes to theme too, there was a different scope in themes, and also with the rule books, the ease of use. Ticket to Ride is something that a child, could probably teach a child, and pick it up pretty quickly. The rule book isn't daunting, and as it doesn't read like stereo instructions. And there's a lot. And when it comes to the mechanics too, I think a lot of the old American style, sometimes they use the word Ameritrash. I hope I'm not offending anybody. The Ameritrash games that are very dice driven, luck based, while these games kind of tried to mitigate luck and things like that. And I could probably go on with the list, but I think that's a good comparison.
Excellent summary there, sir. So since we're on the socials and all the things you just mentioned, by the way, if you do jump on Instagram, and I don't know, I haven't found a ton of the old Cards and Dice sports folks on there. There are a few, but when you go on there, you'll see the whole world of all these Euro games. Closet fulls, shelves full, rooms full, lots of meetups. They had a UK board gaming expo. So there's a new generation of folks out there. And it's curious that you're taking the lead in on a sports game. I'd mentioned a couple games out there to you, World Cup, obviously a soccer game that's doing some colorful card driven, all the info on the player card, another one called Crash Tackle Rugby. But since we're here on the socials, let's tackle your Philip's list of 10 must-dos or must-haves for the world of crossing the paths of the traditional sports sim with the new world of gaming mechanics. Audience targeting right up there, number one. Where do you find these folks?
That's where I think we've seen the biggest shift, is that a lot of the old us. I guess I'm 43 years old, so I'm Gen X, and everybody all these great forums out there full of us sports sim, tabletop sim gamers are other Gen Xers. I'm 43, so I'm on that. I like to consider myself a Zennial. I'm like right on. I think I got the internet when I was 14, and I was playing out of the park baseball in my teenage years. So I was grew up with the tabletop stuff and moved over to the PC things. And then we have a new generation that kind of missed all of that. So it's trying to kind of bridge that divide and between the two. And they are just not, if you bring out Strat to someone young, I think they're going to look at the charts and the books and the things and be so completely overwhelmed they wouldn't even get it out of the box. So what are the things we can do to capture that younger generation, and especially baseball? So I'm working on a game. It's called Sandlot Stars. You can actually go to sandlotstarsgame.com and join the group. And the goal is to have a print and play out for free by the end of the summer. I'm starting to do some blind play testing and trying to. I'm actually porting it to, I don't know if you've heard of screentop.gg. It's very similar to Tabletop Simulator, but it's more of a 2D environment. It's browser based. If you've been on Board Game Arena, it's something kind of similar to that. So I'm starting to kind of slowly get it out to the world. And the goal is with Sandlot Stars is to, if there's a big enough traction, to do maybe a print on demand or maybe even a Kickstarter. I don't want to run a board game company. I design a lot of other non-sports games, and it's more about pitching them to publishers and trying to go that route. But with baseball, it's something that's really it's very niche, and it's not something necessarily a publisher would be interested in. And I'm going for the audience is around is the younger generation. It's families. There's this interesting dynamic of gamers out there. I have my gamer friends and I have my sports friends. I'm a huge San Francisco Giants fan. I was there on Friday night. I don't know if you heard, there was a walk-off grand slam, the first walk-off grand slam the Giants have had since Bobby Bonds in 1970. I was there to witness it. They came in down by 3. Josh Hader was on the mound for the Brewers. He pitched in the All-Star game, I believe, last night. And then the Giants had a walk-off grand slam, and I lost my mind. So there's, and I was with my sports buddies, and then I have my gamer friends. We meet up, during the week, and my designer friends, and they're two completely different worlds, right? The gamer guys, when I bring Sandlot Stars to my meetups, and they say, "You want me to try out sports ball?" and they hear baseball and they're done. And then my sports buddies, they know about do my game stuff, and they think it's Candyland, and they don't want to get involved in on. So there's these two worlds that there's no overlapping. And what's crazy is my sports buddies love fantasy sports. They love playing fantasy football online, fantasy baseball, everything. They're huge fantasy fans, yet they hate gaming. And what they don't realize, fantasy sports is a game. It's a Euro game they're playing. They have things in there like trading. They have negotiation. There's managing budgets. There's drafting. There's all these things that if you're a Euro gamer, you do all the time. So I'm trying to also not only bridge the old and the new, but these kind of gamers and sports fans. And I want to create something that is respected and loved by people, listeners of your podcast, who are hardcore guys and really interested in realism and stats, but also my sports buddies can pick up and play without being too scary. So fathers and sons, boyfriends and girlfriends and partners, and this is kind of what I'm going for. So, and in order to do that, you really need to think about the manual. The rules need to be simpler. Text needs to be kind of shrink down. We see with Euro games a lot more kind of icons than it is heavy text. There's no charts, and flip books really need to be slimmed down or removed at all.
Mm-hmm.
Get rid of, if something looks like an Excel file you print it out, that's not going to work. Too much writing downs of things, and if it's a 3-hour long game, they're going to be scared. So those are the kind of things I'm doing with Sandlot Stars, and there's a lot of others who a lot of other games that kind of have done, and that kind of jumps into my next point about how the theme and realism of baseball, tabletop baseball games. There's a lot of great games. I don't know how familiar you are with like Baseball Highlights 2045. There's a new one that just came out called Bat Flip, Bottom of the Ninth. You familiar with those, Jeff?
No.
They are fantastic baseball games, more on the Euro side. And I think if your listeners had played them, it looks like it's baseball from the box, and then you play it and you may say, that's not really baseball. There's Baseball Highlights 2045 is supposed to take place in the future, where there's cyborgs and robots that are playing, and the pitcher and kind of both teams pitch at the same time, and there's only like 6 batters before the game. It doesn't sound like baseball much at all, but it is. It's like baseball is a theme. But to I think the listeners of this podcast would say, like, that's not really baseball. There's another one that just came out. Highly recommend you look for it. It just got the Kickstarter, the print and play files just came out. They're free. It's called Bat Flip. It's purely card based, so there's nothing else except for. In fact, I printed. Here you go. I did a little print and pay. Here's all the cards I printed out, and I cut up and I can't wait until December when the actual version comes. But they are, and here's We have some of the files that are here, and it's all, the entire thing is, and if you look at the players, I know they are very, very text heavy. It's compact. You can bring it with you. It's fun. But there's some weird rules in it. Like when you strike out, you voluntarily strike out. And why would a batter want to strike out? Well, if you run out of cards, you need to get cards. So you need to strike out, because when you strike out, you get more cards into your hand. And if you want to walk, you simply say, I want to walk, but you can't walk 2 times in a row. Which right there, people in this listening saying, well, that's not baseball. So, and then there's bottom of the ninth, which is a popular game which mimics the just one specific inning, each pitch by pitch. So you literally pitch by pitch, and you're trying to guess where the pitcher throws it, the batter guesses in what quadrant around the strike zone the ball is going, and if you get it right, and there's a lot of text there. It's very in the weeds. They're all fantastic games, and I love playing them, but it's a game that has baseball as a theme. Versus anytime you're making a sports sim, you're gonna have to cut out something to make it into a game, right? Whether it's you use dice instead of actually someone hitting there's tons of things. So you got to decide what you want to cut out and where you want to make gameplay important versus theme important. So the Sandlot Stars game, I'm trying to find that happy medium between a real game that feels exactly like baseball, that if you kept track of the stats, that would give you stats that look like the majors, but being an actual game itself.
And that's it in a nutshell. That's the constant marvel that you can have 100 designers look at this one game and come up with 100 theories about how it's their perception is turned into a new reality. And everyone's going to have this thing that brought them to the game for some reason. So let's go to number 3, gameplay. I mean, you already addressed some points there.
In the tabletop sports world, there's really 2 types of games. There's the Sims, sports sims, which I think, your podcast, APBA, clearly, Strat, these are all sports simulations, more replays. And then there are the games that we just discussed. I mean, there's tons of fun baseball and other sports games out there. And so it's really 2 different genres that are there that are almost completely different. So finding that happy medium. But what I'm trying to do with Sandlot Stars is to really make both sides really happy, without, and maybe it might be biting off too much that I can chew. It could be, I'll just piss off everybody. I'll be I'll make no one happy, but really trying to give that feeling of a sports simulation. So this in my game, it's the play time is about 30 to 45 minutes. You start off in the 7th inning. You play the 7th, 8th, and 9th inning of a tied ball game, and that's basically 3 rounds, which is in the Eurogame world is very typical. When you get 3 rounds of something, is pretty much the standard right there. So yeah, I mean, I guess you technically could play a full game, but it's you're simulating the last 3 exciting innings of play. And then kind of jumping into my 4th topic there was around drafting. And I have my friends love DraftKings, and I've been playing fantasy football for years. I got Out of the Park Baseball. I think I got version 3 was the first version I had. Might have been the late 90s, early 2000s. And then we're up to version 23, just came out at the beginning of this year. And I've played every year since. And then once you get into once you get yourself into an online league, I mean, it is, for those who don't know Out of the Park Baseball, it's a PC and Mac based app. It's been around since the late 90s. It is the deepest it's the deepest system you'll possibly find. You go and they use all the real players, and you go into the minors, and you can bring up guys and draft guys. And there's 30 of us in a league, and they're real guys all over the United States. And we all use Slack in fact, today was the first day of free agency in the year 2030, and I've been trying to trade. I have a lot of pitchers I've been trying to trade away. I didn't get much work done yesterday at my day job because I've been sitting there trying to do trades all day, every day with these guys and into the night. My girlfriend's asleep, and I'm sitting there trying to trade in the middle of the night. So it's a really deep game, but it's a closed system. It's it's a closed system. You're not really learning you're trying to become a master of the game and not the actual app itself, and not the game. And that's why I really appreciate an open system where there's not, you go online on these forums to find the kind of, last year's version, if you had a high contact guy, they just seemed to do way much better than the other ones. And so they tried to fix that. So you're trying to kind of find these tricks and tips and things versus what I love, a tabletop game where all the data is there for you, the odds, everything is open to everyone. And then when it comes to drafting, like I said, my friends love to draft. I got a buddy that when he can't sleep, he goes on DraftKings and just drafts a team for no reason at all. And I don't know how, I'm not a big DraftKings kind of guy, but I love fantasy sports. And it's the most fun is when the beginning of every season, we all get together in real life. We order a bunch of pizza and we have these draft parties. Back in the day, we did it all on giant poster board with magic markers. And now, of course, we're all sitting around our laptops. But the player-by-player draft is just really exciting for so many people. And drafting is just a really popular mechanic in Euro games, especially if you've played Seven Wonders. There's a lot of drafting games over the years, and it's just fun. You're just pick a card. There's a bunch of cards. You pick any one that you want, and then it's the next player's turn. So versus the older school one, which is all team based, because you're trying to learn. I mean, that's how I learned. I grew up on the East Coast, an Orioles fan. I was not there. I was 5 years old in '83 when the Orioles won, so I didn't. That was Cal Ripken's first year. And so being able to go back and replay those old teams, and I got to learn about and then I became a Giants fan, so I got to replay the old Giants teams and I've learned so much about them. I feel like I was there even though I wasn't even born yet. And so I respect that, and I love the team stuff. And what's great is you pick a team and you get started. Drafting is often a terrible way to kick off a game. It's like, hey, you want to play a game? Well, you don't know anything about it, but we're going to spend the first 20 minutes drafting a bunch of players, which is going to determine a lot of how well you'll do in this game. It's not a great way to kick off a gaming experience. So I had to come up. So I wanted to have a way where people create their own custom teams each time, but the draft needed to be kind of quick. It needed to be easy. So in Sandlot Stars, you draw a card. You draw 2 for each position, and this is assuming you're playing a 2-player game in person. You draw cards until there's 2 for each position, but six pitchers. You get 2 shortstops, 2 first basemen, 6 pitchers, etc. And then the away team begins. They pick any player that they want, and then the remaining player. So if they pick the one shortstop, then their opponent gets the other shortstop, and then it's the home player's turn. They pick a card, and then their opponent gets the other card. So not only are you drafting the player you want, you're drafting the player you want your opponent to have, it creates an interesting dynamic. There's a term they use in Euromechanics, hate drafting, where you don't draft someone you want, you draft it to screw your opponent. So there's a little bit of that in there. But with Sandlot Stars, all the players are actually even. They're just different. So there's not obviously there's batters hitting 200, there's batters hitting 300. Those guys are certainly a lot better. In this game, the players are even, but they're all different. There's kind of swing for the fences guys, the hit or miss guys, there's contacts guys, there's everyone in between. There's all sorts of different specialties. So it's about creating a custom team. There's no bad choices. If you draft someone, it's not a terrible choice. It's just a different choice. And how certain players combo with other players. And that's a big thing in the Euro game world, is creating combos. If you played Dominion before, Wingspan does a good job of that, where one card on its own doesn't mean much, but when you combine it with this one, you create this whole new thing. And that's the fun of the game, is exploring these combos that even the designer hasn't even thought of because they haven't happened. So you're creating a team. You build this team and the draft, since you really there's 11 cards, there's 11 sets of cards to draft from. Each player drafts 5 or 6 themselves. You can finish a draft in about 5 minutes. So you get this full team in a short amount of time. And even if you don't know about the game, you can simply pick any guy that you want, and it's not a bad choice.
Now, in your example that you posted for your design diary 4, these are actual players, correct? Bonds and Sosa was your example, or are you doing some kind of a fantasy mode there, and with an eye to potentially franchise mode where you can grow fictitious players' skills?
Yeah, so for the play testing and the prototype, I'm using real players, and mostly recent players. There's a lot of Giants players on there, and a lot of the Dodgers players doesn't seem like they're good as the Giants players. I don't know how that must be a weird accident there, but the I wanted to. That's another thing is when you obviously there's licenses out there, and if you want to go on Kickstarter, you can't use the real photos or you might get in some trouble with the names. There's kind of a gray area there. So I had to think about what you got two options. You can go with the made up names, or they'll use like parody names. There's like Hal Ripken Sr. and there's Buster Posey and kind of funny names, which are like, oh, I get it, and that's Buster Posey. Or you can just have completely fictional names, which, hey, every year when there's the MLB draft, I don't know any of those guys. So they're all basically fictional players that are in real life to me. Or you can do what a lot of the great old Sims do, and they use the real player names, but there's no photos or any other information about them. So I wanted to do something a little bit different. I think back to when I was a kid and we'd play in the neighborhood. All the kids in the neighborhood would get together and play down the street, play baseball, and a couple of the older kids would be the kind of team captains, and we'd kind of draft the local kids in the neighborhood, and we all get together and bring that kind of backyard baseball feel to this game. And I wanted to get away from just using major league players. What about all of the fictional players out there? Think about a league of their own, right? Well, that's actually not fictional. That was a real league during the war. How do we get some of these great women in the game? Because we were growing up, we had neighborhood girls. We all played the same, and we think about some other fictional characters out there, like the cast of Major League. My favorite baseball player of all time, Kenny frickin' Powers, from that show Eastbound and Down. How do we get minor leaguers, old Negro League players in the game? But they're all teenagers. They're all kids, and it just has their first name. You don't use their full name when the kid down the street. You call him Jimmy. So he's Jimmy. And I hired an illustrator, and I sent them. I used Brandon Crawford was my. I wanted to see how well he could do. I said, here's some photos of Brandon Crawford. He's got his famous long, beautiful locks, and he has his bandana on all the time. And I said, what can you do to make Brandon Crawford look like a teenager? And of course, the came back with a few sketches. I picked one, and then we have kind of the beginning of this visual design. And that's what I really want to have visual. That's important to Euro gamers. If you gave them a bunch of cards that just have a bunch of names on it, that might be a little off-putting. But when you got some pictures there, and it just says Brandon at the top, you're like, yeah, look, Brandon's got his long hair. He doesn't have his beard, obviously. He's supposed to be 13, I think, in the game. So trying to tap back into that fun nostalgia when we were kids, but still keeping the feel of a real, a major league game.
Before we get to point 5, solo play, I'm just curious about, you mentioned the Sandlot days, playing in the streets, and I just wonder, and also you mentioned that the obvious gap, I mean, between the war gamers, the fantasy gamers, the sports gamers, but do you think the nature of sports fandom has changed? I mean, is it you have to know something about these sports, or why would you play a sports game? It's not something you're going to pick up, as opposed to a game where you're growing, like you say, a garden or painting or whatever. Just your take on, where are pro sports in the public consciousness?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. We know that baseball kind of has a declining fan base, apparently. Well, that's what they keep saying, and I feel like they do all these things to to make all these people who hate baseball to like baseball, and so they're trying to do all these things sometimes with the younger generation, which we hate, especially when they do a national broadcast and they bring on a bunch of kids to be the announcers, and they got these goofy things, and we just, you and me, I'm sure we love hearing two old men sit around and talk about the good old days. I could listen to John Miller of the Giants radio and Crook and Cripe for hours on end, talk about, painting their house and be fascinated. But that doesn't work for the younger generation there. So and especially with I really love I've been writing a diary about the game on Board Game Geek and on some of these other forums as well, and I've been seeing a lot of people, a lot of dads responding and saying this is a great way for me to connect with my kid, to get him involved into. So I love hearing that. I don't have kids of my own, but to hear, and I had a dad who was close to me and taught me everything about baseball, and so it's great to hear that we can reconnect through that. And there might be not something they would do. If they played some of the other games that aren't really baseball, you don't really. It's just baseball as a theme, doesn't really feel like baseball. If you play some of the old school games, there's a 12-year-old kid. I don't know if he's going to handle some of these heavy stats and Excel sheets, and so trying to find that happy medium for those guys.
Interesting. And that's just, I just did an interview with one of the many retirees, returnees to the board games. It's that standard pattern of I played as a kid, I then had to go live real life, and now I can finally come back and enjoy and maybe even afford some of these games. Moving on to solo play, we could talk for hours about all these little things. And a solo play, obviously solitaire, so many of these games are meant to be solitaire. And I'm also curious about what constitutes, drawing back to idea two a bit, what are you personally looking for in the game, and how do you also address this with how do I try to satisfy X and Y and Z, all these folks? So solo play, your thoughts?
Yeah, solo play is one of the areas where the Eurogame world really needs to learn from the old school sim world, because the old school sims have been doing that for decades, and in the Euro world, it's a new thing. It's becoming a trendy thing, and they're not doing it well, and they have a lot to learn. I have a friend of mine, John Brieger. He runs a developer studio just south of here, where he designs his own games. He's done a bunch. With big publishers, but his main forte, he has a studio where people they bring their prototypes to him, and he develops them into something that's ready for balancing things and new ideas and getting them ready for print. He has taken his kind of new forte is around creating a solo mode. So a publisher will come to him and we got this great game, it's going to be huge, but people want solo play nowadays. And and this is just in the last few years we've seen Euro games with solo versions, and I've tried them, and they are tough. It becomes you often have a whole separate rule book just for the solo play, and then you got to read another rule book. And then you're keeping track of things, and it's not fun. The only reason I play solo play is, and as I'm getting older, everyone during COVID decided to get married and have babies, and I don't know who looked out the window at the pandemic and was like, we need to bring more humans into this world, but they were, and I love them, and so now all my friends, they're all growing up. I'm still a 43-year-old kid, and so I find myself playing more solo stuff. I get a new game, I want to get to the table right now. I can't wait for my friends to get day passes from their wives to come out and play. So I'll load up the solo mode. At least that way I can learn it. But the rule set can be daunting. And my buddy John Brieger he says he's not very happy with his old solo designs just a few years ago. But they're figuring out like when you create a solo game, what is the fun? What's the fun you want to capture from a two-player? Like focus on that and try to make it as simple as possible. And it hasn't been cracked yet, but the sports sim world, as you know, have been doing that for decades.
And how much decision making does the player want, and what is manageable? And I'm glad you mentioned it's interesting. Wingspan, they have maybe it's Wingspan, another game. They're calling it bots. They're actually using the digital term, bringing it to these wonderfully, lavishly designed. You got to say lavishly designed games with the whole. And Wingspan actually has a folder with a kind of couple of quick start games to guides to let people walk a new player through this game, but they also have this bot separate. This is how you play it solo. Whereas the war gamers, I think, also, again, I point to the Leaders series, where they really have, it's all geared to that kind of like B-17. Queen of the Skies was kind of one of those games, and in APBA world, it's all about how can I call offense and or defense. Ton of mods for allocating defense, to whatever degree, making the defense matter, rating the top, medium, and bottom ranked defenses, and what is a logical call when you're calling the offensive play. So yeah, it's interesting. That's going to be a huge
Yeah.
challenge.
There's going to be a lot, Euro games are going to, games are, gamers are requiring it now. It used to be, when I was started with Euro games 20 years ago, I mean, rarely was there two-player games with their own category, where this was only for two. So you'd get a game and it was 3 to 5 was the typical, maybe 3 to 4 players, 3 to 5, 3 to 6 players is what you'd see. They'd have a whole other segment for two-player games. And then they said, okay, well, we need to create a two-player version of this, even though it doesn't. I hate that sometimes they put on the box that says we can take 2 to 10 players. It's like, well, the game sucks unless you have 4 or 5 players. So I wish they wouldn't even print that on the box, because people, they buy it and then they get 7 of their friends together and like, this game stinks. I think that doesn't stink. It's just, it's just optimal at 3 or 4. And now they're being forced to do the solo play, and they're still figuring that out. And I think a lot of people, especially the younger generation, they're gonna say, well, if I'm playing solo, why don't I just play a computer game? Why would I want to, and there's been a few games recently. I was just playing, I think it's called Return from Planet X. It's a board game, but has a component that everyone needs to use their phones. There's an app that you get, and you kind of use the two together, which at first I was excited about, but then we're all sitting there playing on our phones, and that's the exact opposite of what we want to do with tabletop sports. I don't want any phones or apps or any. I do that all day long. I sit in front of the damn monitor all day, and that's the last thing I want is to have an app of any kind. I don't care what, even if it's just for keeping score, I don't care.
Thank you for that. There's another game out there now called Flex NBA that they have these. It's a board slash flexagon game where
I've seen is it cool or is it a novelty?
It's I haven't played it through, but I mean, he's got the collectability. It's like you got 5 levels of player. You put them on the board. You look at it, the flexagon through the app and your phone, and you see the player do like Madden-esque kind of stuff. But I think you're right, and this goes, I think, to a point too, which is what kind of player are you? What kind of people play these games? I mean, talking about the kind of kids we were, I only ever expected to play a game solo. So, and these people are expecting to play games in a group context. So it's a really, again, a tricky area to kind of divide to bridge.
Yeah, yeah. That's funny you mentioned that. I've seen the Flex game. It doesn't seem to have much chatter online. I don't know. Yeah, it's like a hologram where you use your phone to get, what do they call it? AR, augmented reality, and but the game itself is not. I read the rules and I was like, I'd love to try. I love to try new games. I got hundreds in my collection, and I've sold hundreds over the years. It's absolutely ridiculous. My poor girlfriend. It's like I don't think about selling the games. I think about where I can have new shelving, which is just anytime she hears me looking at a cabinet, she gets worried because she knows what that means. But the game didn't feel, I haven't played the game, but it doesn't feel like it almost, there was like hit points and almost looked like some sort of Magic the Gathering kind of thing where they're fighting each other, and it looked like the novelty of using your phone to like, oh, that's Steph Curry's waving at me. That must wear out in a minute.
That's the idea. That's the longevity.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the second half of the 10 for here. Dice manipulation and push your luck. Very interesting choice of words there.
Yeah, there's a mechanic called push your luck. I love, one of my favorite mechanics in gaming. There's a lot of great push your luck games. It's one of those things where you do something and you can either stop or you can push your luck and you can keep going. And then you do have the same decision again. You can stop and cash out, or you can keep going. And if you bust, you lose everything. And it's just there's a great game. Can't Stop is from a great designer who passed away some years ago. Now, of course, Sid Saxon, and he's done hundreds of games, especially in the 70s and 80s. He was the most prolific designer before he passed away. And this is just a great, you roll dice, you move your things, and then you can keep going until you bust, and then you lose everything that you got. And then dice manipulation, which is taking a dice roll and then doing something with it, changing the dice face, or in fact, I just there's a new game just came out from Rio Grande Games called Dice Realms. It's this huge box. It was one of the most I've ever think I spent $90 for a game, and it actually comes with dice. So everyone has dice, and each of the faces of it's a D6, but each of the faces can be popped out, and other ones can be popped on. So you start off with a dice that's really boring, and then you upgrade your dice, but which sounds really cool. But then you realize every player has a little pick that you use to pick out the dice face, and then they're about the size of a tack, and you have thousands of these things later. They give you a tray, and so you can organize it is nice, but it's a great idea that probably is best for the computer or something, when you need to have a tool like a shovel to play the game. But I love push your luck. I love dice manipulation games. It's amazing what we've done with D6s, and that's another thing. When non-gamers see something other than a classic D6, they get a little scared. That I feel like, so I wanted to keep it with dice that they recognize, and push your luck is built into baseball already. It's when a batter comes to the plate, they can they go through that same kind of mechanic where it's like, hey, do I just want to bunt and make contact? That's easy to do. They're not really pushing my luck there. I'm just kind of that's definitely do that. Do I maybe swing for hit for the gap, or do I swing for do I go all in and swing for the fences? And so it's the same mechanic that I wanted to capture, this kind of, do I just want to make contact? Do I want to go for a gap? Do I want to go for something huge? And same with the pitching style. Do you throw your fastball that or do you throw that 12-6 curveball, or you throw that knuckleball? God knows where it's going to go. So it's this interesting decision that both the batter and pitcher make, and I really wanted to capture that. And this is where the crux of Sandlot Stars comes in. And I love, in all the games we mentioned, Strat and Statis and Dynasty and APBA, it's you simply roll and it tells you what happened. And if you hit a home run or you struck out, you didn't feel like you did anything. What did you really do to earn that home run? Did you really earn it? It's and if you're trying to replay games and you have a big project and you don't have time that's the whole point, is to make it as quick as possible. And it's fast, and you go through a 9-inning game quite quickly. But I really wanted to feel like I earned that home run. But there's some games out there that go pitch by pitch, and I'm like, well, that's just, a single at bat might be 10 pitches, and like I got 10 turns for one at bat. That's just too much. So I had to come up with something that's quick and fun, yet strategic and tactical, and it really needs to feel like baseball. So the best way I can explain this system is it's almost like a 2-player competitive advanced Yahtzee. If you know the rules to Yahtzee, you have 5 D6s, and in Yahtzee, you can roll the dice 3 times, and you're trying to meet these challenges. Maybe it's a 2-pair or a 3-pair or a full house. Well, that's where I start with. So each of the player cards, and if you go to, you'll see some examples. If you go to sandlotstarsgame.com, each of the players have these different kind of Yahtzee-like challenges on there. And the pitcher rolls first. He rolls his 5 die, and then the batter does. And they can freeze dice just like you can in Yahtzee, where you roll something, and then you look at your card and you decide which of these challenges you want to go for. Do you want to go for something that might get you a home run? It's hard to, like four of a kind. That's tough to do. Or do you say, well, maybe I'll just go for 2-pair. That's something easy. And then the pitcher's doing the same thing. He has a very similar set of challenges on their card, and they go back and forth. And you really need to watch what the pitcher's doing to see, like, oh, this pitch, he needs, if he gets 4 in a row, the pitcher's going to do something amazing. So what do I try to do to mitigate that? Do I go for something heavy as well, or maybe I'm going to bet that he isn't going to make this 4 of a kind. He's going to kind of bust, and so after each challenge has a difficulty assigned to it. Something easy might be worth a few points. Something really hard, 5 of a kind, is worth 10 points. And after each player rolls, which is kind of supposed to simulate the pitching back and forth, they each roll 3 times, and then they resolve the challenge. And what you do is you take the pitcher's score. So let's say the pitcher did a 3 of a kind, and that might be worth 3 points. The batter did a full house type thing, which is worth 5. It's 5 minus 3. It's a +2. Then you look at this very small. There's only one chart. I call it the ballpark card. There's a lot of different ballparks to play in, and you look at and it's big text. It's very easy to read, and it will tell you what happens. You look up, okay, +2. Okay, this means I got a single. Maybe if it was a -3, maybe it was I don't know, it could be a sac fly or something. And you really feel, and you hit a home run when you score something big and the pitcher scores nothing at all, and then you get these two worlds collide where you got something amazing, the pitcher completely screwed up, and you really feel like you earned that home run. And every ballpark card is different. That's the first thing you do in the game. You pick which ballpark you want to play in. And that kind of ballpark dictates things like the length of the game. Some are shorter than others. Some are encourage more base running, encourage more sacks. You can kind of jump into different eras. Some of them have a kind of shallow outfield line, so it kind of represents maybe the steroid era. Some of them are more about kind of the dead ball era and singles. So you can kind of decide each game. Every game is very different because you have a completely different set of players with your custom team, and then you have this different ballpark, which kind of decides your strategy. If you're playing in Boston, there's the big green monster that you got to avoid, and all sorts of. In San Francisco, we have triples alley, so you're more likely to hit a triple that you would, and all sorts of things in between. So it's this really interesting system that's kind of going to make or break the game. Everyone I've played, everyone who's been play testing it loves it. People know Yahtzee. And I go way beyond Yahtzee has Full House, and I go way beyond. It's amazing what you can do with a set of 5d6 dice and all these really cool, interesting combos. There's a lot of fun things I've done. So every card has a different set of challenges. There's no two cards that are alike, and you need to figure out. It's almost like a mini game in itself each at bat.
And these stadiums are based on the actual stadiums, or are you kind of fictitious based on actual spec?
Yeah, I pulled out some of the best. I mentioned the Big Green Monster in Boston. I mentioned Triple Alleys, and I've kind of used those as a starting point, but it's supposed to be. We're not counting the feet to where a home run is and things like that. It's supposed to be quick and easy, and then we can have a lot of fun stuff. Since this is supposed to be a kind of backyard baseball style, Sandlot style. There's different types of turf and different things that maybe kids would play on that kind of affect the game quite differently, and your strategy and tactics change depending on the ballpark you pick. So we're not going for exact replica here, but every game's going to feel very different.
Well, now, I think you've addressed a lot of point number 7, the multiplayer aspect, or some of that. I mean, you're kind of eyeing the other person's decisions and outcomes to make a counter choice.
Yeah, and when I was thinking about multiplayer, I'm thinking beyond even 2 players now. There's a lot of people play just solo. There's 2-player, but what if you got a group of friends together, or you got 4 guys over, and you all want to play a baseball game? Well, how do you do that? Do you sit in just one corner and everyone's playing a different game? That's not really much fun. What's the point of that? So, and this is one of the challenges I've had with this game. I'm still developing this game. I'm going to release a print and play. What I love about print and play and print on demand is that you can release something and then continue to collect feedback and keep working on it. And since it's free, I'm just honored that someone would actually want to try it out and give feedback. So the multiplayer, and when I'm thinking 3, 4, 5, even more players, obviously everyone can get together, create their own leagues and basic rules and those things. But I wanted to replicate. There's another game. The other co-founder of the San Francisco board game designers, Jim McCullum, one of my design partners. We've been working on a football game together for some years, and we were trying to recreate, and we wanted to create an entire. If you play fantasy sports with your friends, it takes an entire season. So the NFL season is 4 or 5 months. You play this for 4 or 5 months. What if I wanted to take that 4 or 5 months and shrink it down to a single evening where you have a draft, you have a regular season, a championship, trading, everything that happens in that 4 or 5 month NFL season happens in a single night. Or maybe there's 2 or 3 seasons happen in a single night. How do you get an entire season down to an hour? So we talked about just focus, and we can't play a full game. We created this for this football game we're working on. We created these mini games where you're replicating the final drive of the game. You get a different scenario. It's like, okay, you're down by 4. There's 30 seconds on the clock. You're at the 35-yard line, and trying to create these little games. So if you got together with a group of friends, you pair up, you play this little game that might take 15 minutes, and then you kind of round robin around, and then you can have a championship or do whatever you like. So there's and something we could do something similar with baseball, but that's one of the things I'm actually still working on. And I think in the tabletop sim world, that doesn't really exist, or people do it custom, right? They come up with their own rules. Yeah, something to keep thinking about. How can you make a 2-player game into a party like experience?
Fast Drive Football came out last year. Al Wilson did this, and he constantly updates and he bangs out these all the team sets and yeah, that community feedback. It really builds that community feedback and that participatory aspect. Number 8, visuals. We talked a lot about that, and really components are king. Print, I always say, is premium. Print ain't dead, it's premium. People do not want flimsy. People do not want cheaped out. I mean, if you're going to print out at home, that's one thing. You can, doll it up to your heart's delight. But if you're going to spend a certain amount of money or whatever, I mean, there's got to be at least some premium, maybe level. If you're, even on a Kickstarter, you can do levels of the availability or an on-demand situation.
Yeah, so much of Kickstarters now. Kickstarter has been a blessing and a curse for the board game community. I mean, I think I read, this was years ago, I read that at Essen, which is the big spiel, the big festival they have in Germany every year, they had 5,000 new games that came out, which is just like, oh my God. And that was years ago. I heard that stat. I'm sure it's gone up ever since now. That was kind of the infancy of Kickstarter. So it lowers the barrier. You have a lot more niche games. There's a great game coming out. There's a guy in Oakland, and I'm forgetting his name. He's doing a game about college football. It's about the kind of seedy world of college football. It funded on Kickstarter. It was a huge success right away. It's something like a publisher would never pick up on their own. But you and I, Jeff, would love something about making behind the deals, and you have a big map in the United States and you travel around to recruit guys, and there's a whole thing going on. I don't even know if you actually play football or not. It's kind of around the management side of things. So something like that never would have existed before Kickstarter, and now it's huge. But people off Kickstarter, and it really made visuals and artwork more important than ever, because that's what you're buying. You don't ever play the game. You go to the Kickstarter page, you see the visuals, and then you make your decision. And so people, and you see these amazing, these artists, and they're beautiful, but then you get the game 2 years later, and the game is terrible. There was clearly no development work that went into it, and that's such an important phase that the publisher does. The designer gives it to the publisher, and the developers take it out of your hands. They work it, and they create, and it really, the balancing, the tweaking, those things are so important for a game to last. You might play it once and you're like, oh, that was fun, I'm never going to play it again, but it was a good experience. A good development means something that's going to last and over again. So it's all about artwork on so you need to have the art. So so definitely something with Sandlot Stars. So we have an illustrator who is working on players. Now, of course it's a very expensive endeavor. It's not something I can do and create 100 cards and just give that out for free, because I'd be broke. So it's something I'm doing a little bit of right now. You have the PNP has the real players photos, which I've just ripped off the internet, but and that's give that for free. But if this catches on, and we get some Kickstarter money to really ramp that up and get some fun. Definitely, if you get a chance, go to sandlotstarsgame.com. Check out some of the visuals there. Check out young Brandon Crawford and tell me if that really looks like a young Brandon or not. But
awesome.
Yeah, definitely visuals there. Super important.
It'd be interesting if you created a game about the formation of the NFL or any of the legacy leagues. Could be interesting.
Ooh, that's interesting. Like early on,
it's like, and it gets you right, because we talk a lot about how these games prompt our interest in the history and inspire us to learn more about it. But that's a completely different topic. Number 9, odds and gambling.
Thinking about open systems versus closed systems, where you can really know the odds of what's going to happen, and really think about that. Just like you're at a casino, you think about the odds. Baseball is very similar. When a guy hits a single, maybe it's a double, he rounds around first, the first base coach is thinking like, what are the odds of this guy? I think about that guy's arm. I think about his speed. I think about where the ball is right now, and do I want to send him to second or not? That base running is one of the most fun things in baseball, and we don't get enough of it. And if it's a simple, it's a risk. It's like, it's 50-50 shot. If you know someone's going to steal a base 50-50, would you do it? I don't know. Maybe on 2 outs, maybe not. Now, if it was not, if you knew the odds were 90%, then yeah, Nate might send them every time. So it's a push your luck. It's a bet. It's kind of gamble. It's kind of a risk that you take. And so I'm trying to find these fun things in baseball and trying to highlight them. If you and I will enjoy a no-hitter, we go to a game and there was no action at all, and we might think it's fantastic. But to the regular user, they come to a game, they don't see any hits at all, they're going to be bored out of their minds. And so how do we find that happy medium and of course a walk-off grand slam like I saw the other night that Mike Yastrzemski hit, everyone enjoys, but you can't have that every game. And with tabletop games, most people are going to play, if they play the game, they're going to play it once. The vast majority of people will play a game a single time. And so you need to make a great first impression that one time. If you have a new board game and it's good most of the time, but every once in a while, because of a bad whatever the nuts, roll or thing, and it just turns to crap, people are going to say this sucks, and they're going to go on the Board Game Geek and they're going to rate it a 4, and they're going to say, well, we didn't really have much fun with this one. So, and baseball is one of those sports where it's like not every, I watch just about every Giants game. No, they're not all good. There's some real stinkers in there. And so what do you do to balance the realism with excitement, knowing that most people, every game out there, Wingspan, most people, if they played Wingspan, you played it once, right? Because a friend had it and you were somewhere and they taught it to you and you played it and that was cool, and you didn't decide to buy it yourself. You never had a chance to play it again. And probably the second most amount of times people play the games twice. Maybe they played it twice. I have over 400 games in my collections downstairs, and most of them have been played once, and they're good. We played it, we had a great time, and then we're such new game junkies, and especially when you're a designer, if you're a designer, the best way is to play as many games as possible. That's all you got to do, is keep playing new stuff and try new genres, and then you might, because you're working on something and you get stuck, maybe another game will inspire you to, you don't have to, not necessarily stealing a mechanic or something, but just that inspiration there too. And gaming changes, just like we discussed earlier, like every year there's kind of an evolution, just like in sports. God, baseball plays differently than it did 20 years ago. The NBA with a 3-point line and Steph Curry. I'm a big Warriors fan. So, that the game's changed, and the board game world has changed, has evolved as well for the better. But you really need to make that first point really, that first experience needs to be really fun. And if the first game is a slugfest and it's 9-10, it's not really fun. Or if it's 1-0, it's not really fun. So what do you do to make a game exciting every time? And so I'm trying to find the really exciting things of baseball in Sandlot Stars and emphasize that. And base running and stealing is a big part of that. That's why if you look at the board, the base running is not something you have to dive in through a manual to remember what to do. It's right there. Every single outcome of a play has a certain odds, essentially, so if you hit a single, everybody on the bases, including the batter, will move 1 base, and then you have the option to advance the runners for a different additional base, and there's odds for each one. And you think about that and you say, and it's all done with 2 D6s, and you're simply rolling, and you can either roll it between a 2 and a 12, because it's 2 12s, 2 D6s. And you look at the odds and you say, okay, well, I can stretch it to a double, and if the defense decides to throw, they need to get a 8 or higher to get me out. That's decent odds. I might take those chances. If they had to get a 4 or higher, well, I probably wouldn't make that. I probably wouldn't do that, because that's pretty good. If it was 11 or higher, well, I'm definitely going. So the better the hit you get, the more you push your luck during that Yahtzee phase I talked about, the more likely your guys are able to do that additional run. So there's a lot of, not only do you hit the ball, there's a big decision when you decide what runners want to go. And I feel like a lot of the old sim games, the running sometimes gets stuck in you're looking up charts and things, and so you wind up not bothering to run as much. And you wind up like, well, I got a single, I'll just be happy with that, or I got a double, I'll be happy with that. I want a lot more decisions in this game than we've seen in old sims.
Interesting. Now, to be fair, kind of a devil's advocate thing. Now, the kind of game you're talking about is that, I use the term parlor game. I don't know if it's the most accurate term, but something that is, and not a party game, but something that is a little more friendly, a little more familiar. But in the traditional sports sims, you are going to get those. My God, is someone going to score? Or it's a drudge of a game, but you got to get through the project, or something like that.
Right.
So, I just, for what that's worth, the idea that that's allowable, or maybe something you have to avoid in this new world look at a sports sim.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, the replay guys, they don't want to have those bogged down with those decisions. They're trying to get through a project. They don't have time to make all these decisions each time. But for two players who are just playing a single game, those kind of push your luck to get guys. And I mean, I love sack flies are fascinating, right? And there's a book. Who wrote that book? I'm fascinated with sacrifice flies. So I'm trying to bring a lot of these interesting, weird things that happen. Base running is definitely part of those, bunting and moving the bases. If it's home runs are boring. There's nothing, and I don't want to get chewed out for this, but home runs are boring. Home runs takes all that excitement they had. You're moving the bases and it clears the bases and all the fun. It's kind of the end. It's over and the fun's over. And so how do you keep that momentum going? And I mean, that's why I love small ball, especially if you're a Giants fan, with that ballpark we got. Well, up until last year when they brought in the fences, but it was all about small ball and moving the guys around. And I love giving up. That was, giving up an out to move a guy from second to third. That was in small ball, that was a big thing. And then it became kind of, you don't want to do that. Outs are really crucial, but now it's kind of coming back in style again. It's like it's all, especially if the game's 2-1, then yeah, you'd absolutely give up an out to move a runner from second to third. So I'm trying to bring that, pull some of the highlight the fun things without completely getting rid of the realism there.
And that is number 10, part of what makes baseball great. And now and
Yeah.
what comes to mind there is that, this is an opportunity to kind of educate folks who might not be, we've talked about casual fans and hardcore fans, and some sims, I think Apple football, for instance, hey, you got to keep bringing around to that, but it's kind of a simplistic look at what people see on the field. You run, you pass, you kick. We're not talking about blocking assignments, dropping into coverage. I mean, cover three, whatever, all that kind of stuff. But in a case of like what seems like you're trying to scheme into here, is that you can get people to understand more about the nuance beyond, the kind of, anticlimactic home run almost, and all that, all the things you say about the fielder manipulation, the base running. And this is, kind of, there's an educational aspect to it that might even help drive folks to seek a more, complementary games that add more of the, maybe pure statistics based season. I don't know if that's even part of your motive, maybe somewhat, is to kind of help drive people, to some of these games, and kind of have that mind meld with them to kind of appreciate all of them, or mostly just to kind of get people who might not otherwise even play these sports sims and get them into some kind of sports sim.
Yeah, baseball is oh my God, it's such a deep game that I understand. If you're watching it for the first time, I can understand why you might be bored senseless. You hear people who don't know what they're talking about. They're like, in fact, before I moved to the Bay, I lived in Finland for 10 years. And about a century ago, a Finnish man came to the United States and he witnessed baseball in the early 1900s, and he brought it back to Finland, and he decided to fix baseball. And they have a game over there called pesäpallo. And pesäpallo there's three bases. There is the first base is a little bit the distance between the base gets longer and longer. So the distance between home and first is quite short. In fact, it goes to the left a little bit. You're going to third base in a regular game. Second base is over where first base was, and then third base is kind of where the shortstop is, and then home. And each distance gets further and further. And there's also the pitcher stands right next to the batter. So if you're a right-handed batter, the pitcher will be where the left-handed batter would stand. They throw the ball up into the air and they put spin on it just like you would any other thing. There's different types of pitches in the game, but they throw it up on the air, and then when it begins to come down, the batter can then hit the ball. If the ball lands on the ground, I believe the player is immediately out. So you're almost doing, it's almost a little like T-ball, but they put a lot of spin on it. And after they hit the ball, they can watch where the ball goes and decide not to run. You have up to, I believe, 3 kind of takes to decide. If you hit the ball, you're like, that's not good, I'll use one of my takes and I'll do it again. And anyway, that was he clearly didn't understand the pitcher to the batter duel that's there. I mean, you watch every pitch, and the first time you're playing the first time you're watching a baseball game, you're not going to get any of that. I mean, I learned more stuff. I'm 43 years old and I've watched baseball for years. I still learn more. Hopefully a game like this can maybe teach you some of these other tactics that are there. Players who know the game better will have definitely an advantage over someone who doesn't. But they still, newbies still have the fun of pushing your luck. Do you want to steal the base? Do you want to push it to third and risk it out? These are fun. If you play any other Euro game, you've had similar decisions like that, but now it's just in baseball format.
Anything in your outlook or approach that discusses fatigue or injuries?
Funny you mentioned that. I was with the football game that my partner and I are working on. We pulled out, we got rid of penalties. We haven't developed any injury yet. Just because we had them in there, it just wasn't. Well, if you have a penalty, the other thing I hang about penalties was like, did I earn that penalty? Just like what I said earlier about the home run. Feel like I earned that home run? If an injury or penalty appears, it's just because of a bad luck. Did I feel like I earned that? Probably not. Did I do something? Did I cheat? Maybe I cheated and I got caught and it's a 15-yard penalty. We're like, okay, that's fair. I was trying to cheat. I got caught. That's a 15-yard penalty. But so we got rid of those, and we're trying to, and again, it goes back to focusing on what baseball is great. Fatigue is a different thing. We're only playing 3 innings, so fatigue doesn't become as big of a factor in there. In fact, our game, so we don't have lineups in the game. I tried to work with lineups, but you really need to have a scorecard to keep track of all the players in the lineup, because once they're on the bases, you begin to forget who was batting third and fourth. And so actually, it's just a classic card game. You can play with the game with the batters in your hand, or you can lay them down. And once they're done, once they've had their at bat and they're out, they go to a discard pile. And once all the players have been used, you simply take the discard pile back into your hand and you start over again. You say, well, I got rid of the lineups. But that's how, growing up playing backyard baseball, that's exactly how it was. We didn't write down our lineups. We had it in our head. Who's going first? And all you remember is like, okay, I go after Steve, and then it's me, and after me is Jimmy. And I'm sure we screwed it up all the time. Who was the order? Maybe Jimmy had to go home. His mother's calling him. He had to go eat lunch. He's coming back. All right, we'll put him back in the lineup. Pitching was the same way. We don't, once a guy is pulled from pitching, you let him back in if he wants to go in and do another inning. So we're kind of trying to bring, and I'm doing that for aesthetics reasons and theme, because I'm going with this kind of Sandlot theme, but also it's just better gameplay. It's just better Euro. You don't have to write things down. You don't have to no sort of bookkeeping and so on. It's one of the sacrifices that I made from real baseball in order to improve the gameplay.
That's a great way to round up the top 10 list here. Yeah. Just to round it out just a touch further, who is your absolute baseball god? Who's your one inspiration?
I got baseball player god. I grew up an Orioles fan, so Cal was a big part of it. But everyone loved Cal, so I had to do something different. So I first got into baseball, and Mike Messina was his rookie year, and I decided I'm going to collect all Mike's cards. And I had, that's before we all had jerseys, and I don't think they knew they had jerseys. My parents wouldn't have spent the money to buy me one, but so I grew up Orioles. In the Orioles, there's Orioles years, and there's '90s years. It was Johnny Oates. managing, and it was Cal, and it was kind of the end of Eddie Murray kind of left, and it was Rafael Palmeiro was there, and God, there was Chris Hoyles and Brady Anderson with his big sideburns, and so those years, there's some good years. We lost to the Indians one year in the playoffs. We lost to the Yankees one year, and then I moved to overseas and came back, and I happened to live a few blocks from what was AT&T Park, where the Giants play. I could actually sit on the deck. And John Miller, if anyone knows John Miller, he's a Hall of Fame announcer. He was the voice of the Orioles. He's from San Francisco, was the voice of the Orioles from '83 until the late '90s or something. So I grew up, my dad and I listening to John Miller outside on those hot summer Baltimore days. And then he moved back and became the voice of the Giants. And so when I left for Finland and my father passed away, came back, and John Miller's the voice. And so it's just listening to John just takes me back to sitting out with my pops. And the Giants colors and the Orioles colors, black and orange. So that was an easy go. And now, of course, I love all the Giants guys. I got a closet full of. I'm a kid. I got all the things I couldn't have as a kid. I got my jerseys. I got Brandon Crawford's kind of my guy now. I love me some Brandon Crawford. Love his home. He's a local Bay Area guy. You can find photos of him as a kid in Giants gear and stuff. So
Nice.
And then Lamont Wade Jr. I don't know if you know about him. He's a gun guy. He's from Baltimore. Love Lamont. His parents were USPS mail carriers, and just good blue collar root guys. So I just any Giants or Orioles guy, I love them.
What's your best baseball movie?
You know, it's funny you mentioned that. Well, I got a top 5. I just watched the other day. I've been avoiding watching Fever Pitch with Jimmy Fallon because I hate Jimmy Fallon. He's the goofy. He's always laughing at his. I'm a big SNL guy. He's always laughing at his own stupid jokes before he even says them. And so I've avoided watching that. But I went and watched it. And of course, I love the movie. If you haven't seen Fever Pitch, it's about this baseball nerd. He loves the Red Sox, and he meets a girl who's not a big baseball fan, and he has to balance him between his and I'm like, oh my God, that's me. I look like I'm an eternal cut kid. So I just love Fever Pitch the other night. I think my top 5, it's always got to be League of Their Own, I forget the order, but Major League, League of Their Own. I do love Field of Dreams. I can always watch Field of Dreams. And then Bull Durham is on that list. And then I saw Bad News. The original Bad News Bears is fantastic. There's no way they could make that movie nowadays where he's swearing and cussing and drinking and driving the kids around. Wouldn't even make it into the movies nowadays. I saw a great movie. If everyone's watching, there's a movie about the Dominican League it follows 2 young guys. It's a documentary on guys in the Dominican. And I'm forgetting the name, but they follow these 2 guys because they get drafted when they're 16. They go from these baseball almost raises them as like a family. They join these teams and they don't expect any money from the players' families. It's if they get signed, they take a part of their signings in order to fund this thing. It's just fantastic. And of course, there's always the issue with the age. They never really know the guy's age. Anyway, exciting movie. Check out that. I forget exactly what it's called, but God, I don't think there's a baseball movie I don't like. Maybe the Major League 3. Back to the minors. That was rough.
There you go. It's just like Godfather 3. Sandlot Stars. When's it coming? And that website again?
SandlotStarsGame.com. Join in on the discussion there. I'm still writing diary stuff. By the end of this summer, I'll have a print and play, whatever form it's in, for people to download, and then I'm going to continue working on it. Like I said, development is key. You don't want to release anything too early, but yeah, the goal is to maybe by spring training next year we'll have a Kickstarter or something. That's kind of the goal. Although once football season starts, I know what's exactly going to happen. I'm going to be more into my football design, and then the baseball design will sit on the table for a while. We'll see.
Phillip, it's been an absolute pleasure, sir. Thank you so much for your wonderful insights. Really exciting stuff.
Great, man. Thank you so much for the invite.